Welcome everyone to a fun nightly operating system look here on for our inspiration of Linux or not of all the other stuff. Probably something many of you have not yet heard about is DragonflyBSD. Of course, there are all the classic vintage BSDs and OpenBSD, NetBSD, FreeBSD, PCBSD, whatever BSD, many of the other BSDs. Maybe many of you might consider DragonflyBSD one of the more esoterics and not worth a look, but in my opinion, one of the more modern and worth a look ones. OpenBSD, of course, maintained for more security, NetBSD for greatest portability. And what they have in common is that they are more simple, right? Not as optimized for performance, not as many features. In NetBSD, for example, they run on very old vintage, smaller, low performance hardware, but yeah, Linux also did at some point until they deleted more and more of this, but yeah, you get the idea. In FreeBSD, of course, the one with certainly maybe the most features, but also the same issues at Linux, regressions, attack surface, and putting everything in there that you can find left and right. And yeah, Dragonfly, free, open source, Unix-like, yeah, you guessed it, forked. So this DragonflyBSD was forked from FreeBSD by Matthew Dillon, an Amiga developer in the late 1980s, early 90s, and FreeBSD developer between 1994 and 2003. Began working on DragonflyBSD in June 2003 and announced it on the FreeBSD mailing list on July 2003. Dillon started Dragonfly in the belief that the techniques adapted for threading and semantic multiprocessing in FreeBSD 5 would lead to poor performance and maintenance problems. He thought to correct those anticipated problems within the FreeBSD project. Due to conflict with other FreeBSD developers over the implementation of his ideas, his ability to directly change the codebase was eventually revoked. Despite this, the DragonflyBSD and FreeBSD projects still work together, sharing bug fixes, driver updates, and other improvements. One thing is that strikes me a little bit is that Wikipedia lists this here kernel type hybrid. I probably need to chat with Matt Dillon there another day what he means by this, because I took a look. I've not yet seen so much non-monolithic stuff there, but probably need to poke closer. Maybe this is just wrong or advertising, I don't know. Of course, yeah, Userland BSD, licensed BSD, certainly this is a BSD fork, so everything is for the most part BSD. It is, however, newsworthy that they implemented they diverged significantly from FreeBSD, implementing some lightweight kernel threads as well as in-kernel message passing, and also for this certainly symmetric multiprocessing performance stuff there, and another file system called Hammer, because what between Better and Hammer certainly right on Linux. And so in the meantime, they even have Hammer 2. You see so much of what I follow everywhere. And I find it a little bit funny that each and every operating system needs its file system implementation or two. In my opinion, sometimes, yeah, too much choice is too much choice. You save files and then you can't read and write them anymore. Yeah. When we continue with our microkernel research here, with the low-level code that I'm working on and establishing, I will definitely not implement a file system in the next decade or two. I think I will just use like XFS or, well, certainly implement FAT for compatibility with DOS diskettes, or ext for that, hopefully sort of relatively easy to implement, and then maybe even better FS, although that is so feature packed that I'm not really sure. But anyway, I will most likely, what I want to say is I will not re-implement another file system. There are certainly too many already, and they just recently at DragonflyBSD finished their Hammer 2 implementation. Not sure if it includes, of course it includes journaling, maybe they also have integrated RAID or I don't know what. So with that being said, let's take a look here. I had this prepared, but did I now use the wrong terminal? I sure hope. Okay, maybe I did. Anyway, let's fire this up. So I have here some hard drive, because maybe we install this. The thing is, if we are not installing this, there is not too much to see. I probably need to change the default here to zoom to fit. Now it's booting already, so that is what I mean. It's not that much to see if it's a BSD, and yeah, it's booting. The choice of devices, I've chosen here a HCI for serial ATA and a regular IDE, I think CD-ROM. Not sure if that's combination. I would expect this to install, but let's see. Also, that's not the first time I've taken a look at this. DragonflyBSD, I've already did this 5 years, 10 years ago, at least 2 times or something. Maybe fun fact, first of all, I will certainly create here a better example installation of containers of virtual machine images for me to have at hand for testing. But otherwise, maybe even one of those run as a web server to just have like to have some experience with other systems on a daily basis of administration and what is going wrong, what happens, how they behave, and fun stuff like that. What was installation? Not sure. Was it install? Actually, I should have probably read the freaking manual. So much to. Does it even show here? Here's installer. Actually, wait a second. I should have read. To start installer, installer, not installer. Very funny. Yeah, obviously, install is a regular, also Unix, Linux install program stuff. Very clever from me. Then we can take a quick look. Not sure, does it have here something like, doesn't have CPU info. Of course, it's a BSD, so Unix, Linux, you name it. You have a shell, you have SED, you have all the other fun stuff here. Man page for something, does it have? So this is installer, actually interesting. It does have already installer. Didn't expect this run this kind of thing to have an installer. So this is just booted, right? So this is when you take the ISO image and you run it. And maybe let's fire up the installer and then I tell you a little bit more. Also, yeah, other stuff like top or stuff. And here you see, unlike Redux, it has the Rust OS. It has top, but also PS. And this is what I mean. It has, of course, some kernel threads here, so I would need to do more evaluation. What is really, if there is something more like monolithic kernel. Maybe with hybrids, they actually mean like monolithic with modules or something of that sort, or monolithic with modules and kernel threads, or I don't know. Anyway, I would be pretty surprised if it's really address space isolating. But you see, even on Linux, you have like other kernel threads, kernel worker threads for stuff like sometimes even sound cards, but certainly AHCI, NVMe, or even the PS3 frame buffer, as we have recently learned, background copying the frame buffer to the VRAM. But you see, it is already, of course, internally a little bit structured to have those modules in Linux and BSDs and stuff there. And then, in my opinion, why not address space isolate this fully for real security and maintainability. Let's see, we have here some comments. Haven't checked in a while. Welcome everyone then who hasn't checked in a while. Pop-up chat. So why do we take a look at this? First of all, I want to show you all of those a little bit, especially like what we've done previously, the more esoteric ones, BOS, Haiku certainly, or Redux. And one issue certainly is, why do I not take more often a look? If I only play with operating systems, then I don't get work done. So that is why every 5 years or so I looked into DragonflyBSD and stuff. So let's also, now I typed here in the OBS. Let's hope it didn't change things so much to that sort. Do we have any other? This is all expected. The probably use space packages built on top of that LS hardware. Look at the installer. Yeah, let's install it. By the way, Alice. No, I focus on that. Not that I change here, Alice. Oops. Hello, H key. Anyway, so installer. And starting the installer, I've actually done this already some 5 years ago. Install, configure, live utilities. Of course, here from the kind of Unix UI stuff, similar to what our T2, our unsuccessful one-man distribution Linux stuff is doing with Stone set up to 1. But so yeah, they have installer, someone else has installer, everyone has an installer. Application will install one hard drive. So I will talk a little bit, I just want to have this installer going on here. I think if your legacy, so probably this QEMU probably prefers EFI, select a disk, it is probably that one. Yeah, not the greatest fan of this abbreviate device name stuff where you don't know what it is, but whatever. Use entire disk, I guess, and yeah, it's virtual anyway. The disk was formatted, amazing stuff. Hammer 1 or Hammer 2, then it's this, and then here's some nice subpartitions, BSD slices or whatever. So boot swap, let's hope this is doing something usable. Will just be on the root mode. Yeah, that is okay with me. Small hammer can fill up very quickly. You have to run hammer prune everything and hammer reblock, and yeah. Also, yeah, esoteric file systems have their own special needs, you name it. So much to, yeah, probably should need to make a screenshot, or anyway, how much I will begin installing files. Everything is now ready to install. Actual files which comprise Dragonfly operating system are selected, begin, return to, yeah, do it. And the reason I'm not the most impressed with the BSDs, in general, the code base is even more vintage and legacy than Windows and than Linux. And Linux is already, in some ways, Linux, at least the kernel, is a little bit more modern in C than the more vintage BSDs. And on that sort, of course, NetBSD most portable, OpenBSD maybe most secure because most reviewed for that, not by architecture, not by microkernel, not by isolated address spaces, but at least by code review and less features, less attack surface, you name it. And from that part, the DragonflyBSD looks the most like modernized, like trying new ideas, what Matt is doing there. And I hope it's even installing, most likely only hammering here the USB 3 interface here. Now it's moving. I think Dragonfly should definitely be able to run a whole X server, so most likely you can run this in with a graphical desktop, so like this black box, and not sure if OBS, but certainly an Xorg server and Intel GPU should come up, I guess. And yeah, also there you see, I said in the beginning of this live stream, they still work together, so they say on Wikipedia, FreeBSD and Dragonfly, but most of the driver stuff, even like GPU, Mesa, Linux kernel, BSD, everything has to be redone, rediffed, rebased, reported, and there you see all the time, not only with the 1000 Linux distributions between Ubuntu, SUSE, Red Hat, Fedora, Gentoo, Arch, Manjaro, T2, and all the others, like our unsuccessful one-man amazing distribution stuff. And everything needs to be redone, right? And yet then, this is of course surprising, right? Everyone is using X3 for the graphics here, or maybe eventually Wayland, but I think Wayland is mostly a Linux-only affair due to all the Linux-only native APIs, although maybe there are some ports already somewhat working anyway or so, but yeah, somehow this is why so many decades gone and yet graphics, X-windowing system, somehow whatever. So yeah, you may wish to install boot blocks on one or more disks, and I guess accept and install boot blocks. Safely installed, configure the system, select time zone. Yeah, so in concept, not too far away from our Stone. I have to say, actually root, we probably want to set a root password, do we? root password test, accept and set. Root password hasn't changed. Date and time doesn't really, whatever. Don't really, can we, probably that. Use that, let's see what happens. That looks good, virtual anyway, whatever. And here we can, I actually wonder this, I hope this is already inside the system, right? Local SQLite, what select and store software packages that you want to remove from, what accept and remove. No, I wanted to remove, I wanted to add, so it was add anyway. Then, what, did you not install this already from the CD you can boot? I guess we can reboot, right? This is slightly confusing. You could say it is as confusing and reads a fucking manual like our unsuccessful one-man T2. So about the shutdown, yes, reboot. I guess it looked like it was installed. There's some error there, entropy file, right, failed, just like you would expect from our unsuccessful one-man Linux. Has been halted. Then let's close this and remove the CD boot here, which would be that. I only installed this, the only one that I would even be the, here. F1 Dragonfly BSD default. Let's see, this probably here boots already while I best fit zoom the graphics. Boot, yeah, this boots anyway. Do it. Did I not say best fit? Zoom to fit. I clicked it that wrong. Anyway, you see all the systems not too different if you boot a Linux system or BSD. It looks a little bit similar-ish. All the device drivers print out some status notification, what's going on. And yeah, there we have it. Installed that in Snap, and now we could do more stuff. Probably this doesn't have here. I mean, this is a little bit funny. How large was the ISO image anyway? Download. So this is Minix Dragonfly with H for human readable. So 723 megabyte and no X maybe. This is a little bit large in my opinion. So in our minimal Xorg in our unsuccessful one-man T2 Linux are usually with Xorg. I think our minimal are 300, minimal Xorg with like the basic Xorg stuff, and drivers is probably 500. So not really sure what they pack in there. That 700 something doesn't include an X server, but whatever. Now we would need to emerge package source build world, something that, but yeah, if you wanted to run this, if like not have all the same virtual machines for your cloud infrastructure at work or home or something of that sort, to mitigate some attacks by not having the same monoculture there all over your servers, certainly something to look into. And code-wise, I think I've not yet showed code, right? Usually I show code. I opened here something. So yeah, make no mistake, this is the code. And when you take a look here, so this is as we expected. Copyright here, Berkeley, University of California, and so on. And yeah, so how old is the code? If you take a look in Dragonfly, this kern_foxy. Is this copyright 1982? How vintage is this? What kind of code bases does even more modern systems like that? And this is what I mean, at least at Linux, everything was written from scratch from 1990 around on, although from some one-man unsuccessful hobby person at home. But yeah, this BSD, that is what I mean. The BSDs are, of course, even more vintage, even more old-fashioned C for the most part anyway. And yeah, you could ask, does it matter old-fashioned C or more modern C? The biggest thing, this is why I'm since 20 years a Linux guy, although starting to get my doubts there in the address space isolated security world of microkernels. But what I really don't like the most in Linux is ever changing, right? Ever changing, change the APIs and again add an argument, remove an argument, rename this, and move it all around the place, add some new multi-queue blocks here and whatsoever, and break stuff left and revert it back and yeah, merge, revert and zip rename it and yeah. And yeah, even so Dragonfly, even this here, University of California. And then when you look here at the code, of course, totally what you would expect here, old-fashioned C all over the place, although yes, correctly indented, and some nice helpers, just like in the Linux kernel, for each here of this RB tree and this fork, some struct and some argument. But it's funny, I saw here already, so you see here return error. What I always find really funny on this code basis, that here they used return in here return 0 in brackets there. Always really wonder why they do this. It looks always alien to me. This looks like a function call. I'm not really sure if this gets rid of a warning or why they have not in so many decades removed this old-fashioned stuff there. I mean, in Minix they even had functions with void. Forgot to mention this. This is also like function with like void arguments. This is really other old-fashioned C from the last millennium. That I really wonder why people still use this stuff. I mean, why would I type extra work to void there if I could just type nothing, but whatever. Doesn't really help me for anything. But if you are a fan of void function arguments and stuff, then let me know. And if you are a function of return, return with braces there around your return value, then yeah, otherwise also some if-defs, if-def k-trace, then not. This is of course in the big picture not too indifferent from the Linux kernel, to be honest, for the most part. Some more modern stuff here is what they have more rewritten is here some kern XIO, copyright 2003, 2004. Not really sure if they haven't touched the file since then, but whatever. And Dragonfly Matthew Dillon. And of course, even this file is new, it looks the same. And by the way, as so often in software architecture, you have some init stuff. With some structure T of your whatever you're working with. But then again, this is exactly what I mean, right? You could have a constructor for your XIOT class that initializes all the stuff, but yet in 2003 and 4 here and 2019, we still open code initializers like this. And I mean, we invented object orientation for a reason, right? And then this could be methods. And also fun fact, I wonder why they not just mset all of this and leave it to the compiler to reunify it, but something of that sort. Yeah, that is how the code looks. I mean, at least it's commented and looks readable. And yeah, but here they do this again. I mean, somehow they must love this. This is so alien, in my opinion. This is, in my opinion, if return is something else than a function call. Of course, this is not a function call. This is just creating here, what is the correct term for that in C? Anyway, it's of course not a function call, but it just makes it look like it, in my opinion. It's not the most amazing thing to do, and of course everyone understands this, but do you really want to do it? Do they really in this file do it everywhere? Because in the other file it was not even always the case, but I really don't understand why you would do this. You could sometimes, but the type is even int and this is int, so it's not even changing the type here. What even was the name of this construct and see what doesn't, anyway, it doesn't really matter. And yeah, also, I mean, this is really old-fashioned in my opinion. You could say it doesn't matter, but I usually prefer to use the types to declare variables only when I use them. So it's quite a while since I is used, like here, and then I usually prefer the more modern style of having the scope of variables inside the for loop, so have for int I here, and then you can't accidentally reuse the value in the next code there when it's not supposed to be used. So I prefer to limit the scope of variables to those loops to minimize, and this I'm only part-time. With Linux I was never a full-time kernel developer. I was only a little bit kernel developer for what we needed, what we had projects and stuff, where I found a bug and so on. But then even in my high-level code, I do this to avoid mistakes and keep the code readable. And yet here, they don't do this. But yeah, leave me always, as usual, leave me comments what you think about this stuff. Does it not matter anyway? Or do you agree with something or not? Or is it just complaining on a very high level because this code is amazing? And yeah, GhostBSD uses updated Xorg. Well, I would expect most of them use RHEL. Maybe NetBSD might be using a quite old Xorg, I think. But again, there are so many operating systems, I can't memorize all of them. And but for the vintage hardware, I think I once saw that NetBSD was Xorg was older. And yeah, also there is GhostBSD, one desktop BSD, PC BSD, sometimes also renamed. And Storm asks, their colleagues tell him that BSD is superior to Linux in respect of Userland organization and network stack performance and reliability. What's your opinion? Reliability, well, I have many of my machines running for years, so even there the uptime often was high. Although it depends, if you run this on the server, the reliability of Linux is actually usually quite good, unless you have some failing TG3 network hardware or something. Also, usually performance of Linux often is better. You need to find a very specific case. Linux is just so much more code that it is so much more code because often the drivers are so much more optimized. This is why sometimes the drivers are twice the code just for more zero copy and whatnot, fancy new network API, zero copy, ring buffer, whatsoever tricks and such. The only thing most probably the Userland organization might be more organized because simply it's like one package source code tree and stuff, and also less Userland stuff. For example, what I just recently debugged around myself, and beside I know from the Linux, there are even in our T2 over 3,000, if not soon 4,000 or something packages, and many of them are different, right? This is in BSD, everything is in this code tree and everything is similar, but often relatively simple, right? So I don't even find it too outstanding for the most part, also because it's simply so vintage, right? So when you look here in some programs, that would be maybe SBin, and then you have here a lot of programs. So you have them like, oops, I wanted to click on, but let's click on dmask. So in here you have all the code base here in one large tree. In Linux, you only have the Linux kernel and everything separated. That is in general not a bad thing in my opinion, because the kernel is already large enough, and then you have the kernel and everything else. And stuff like dmask and ls and so on in Linux would be in core utils, or so in GNU core utils. And many of the packages follow some similar style, but some like LVM2 or other large packages like Xorg and stuff, they are written vastly different. And that is why if you have management stuff like LVM2, RAID tools and stuff, then the programming style, the code base might often differ enormously between, for example, if you take SmartMon tools written by, but SmartMon tools is most likely also package also used on BSD, right? So you have for the hard drive smart self-monitoring and stuff there. the same package on BSD and Linux anyway, so whatever. And this is the difference of all the user space programs, that they differ. So the programming style, how the functions and internal commands are structured is different between all the Linux programs, LVM2, SmartMount tools, Core Utils, and so on. Then on BSD they are similar, but you see in BSD this old-fashioned stuff here is of dmask, for example, one small tool. Of course, it's one small tool, but it is also from 1991 and maybe not much touched since then. And it's of course all very open-coded, old-fashioned style. So no helpers here for the argument handling. The argument handling here coded very directly. Like I would maybe, if I would rewrite this from scratch nowadays, maybe a little bit more organized internal command structure with some more automated command line parsing and not parse everything here open-coded. And yeah, you see buffer length, and I saw here some manual. This is of course why, yeah, here R index, X index, if yeah, this kind of programming style, calculate index for dump insanity clipping, is like, yeah, where you easily make some off by something mistakes, and it works. Like, of course dmask is a total simple tool, but it could also be some package stuff. And yeah, manual, this is exactly this kind of stuff that I would say in a modern operating system maybe we should not have such code at all. Not in Linux, not in BSD, not this manual buffer indexing addition here and then off by one and overrun. And yeah, certainly thousands of people have read this. Maybe there is no bug anymore, but maybe we should in 2019 not write code like this anymore. Maybe we have another program, like where would be, do they have here, for example, mount. You see all the commands are in here. In Linux, these programs are in maybe Core Utils. I can actually check this where we have the mount stuff. Maybe even X2FS, and then we have also other mount in ZumberFS and stuff. And actually we have multiple mounts. We have a mount in Core Utils and in embedded utils and busybox, but mount.invar admflist. This is why the actually okay, quite some. Then only bin and okay, fuse. Okay, yeah, okay. Then there is always this strange craft, right? So there is even this HFS mount craft here. For this HFS utils here, which is of course silly, which is not even doing in kernel mount. This is some garbage. But yeah, we have mount NFS util. So you see, instead of having this on one source tree, we have here util Linux, just as I said, or yeah, Zumber of some. Okay, this is an init, but otherwise NFS utils. Yeah, for mount NFS and yeah, similar stuff. So, but yeah, the only thing is I wish the packages, of course we have Core Utils and Util Linux, which already make up the vast majority of the user space stuff. Not really, I would really not say that this is a bad thing, because likely you even have here SED. Also, what do we have here? SBin. Oh, this is SBin. Let's see in maybe bin, where we probably have here some small SED. Yeah, you see, this is a little bit, I would actually say this is a benefit of Linux that you have the kernel and the rest, because even you see cat and CP and you have everything in this Dragonfly source tree. And yeah, actually I find it's quite nice to have a Core Utils and Util Linux stuff and a dedicated org package and SED package. Where is even SED? No SED here. No, whatever. You get the idea. Good old Gotos, yes, of course. The Unix handling is comprised of Gotos. Gotos, no surprise there. Fun fact, even in my own code, sometimes we have Gotos. I would not say Gotos are total evil. I even use them sometimes myself. Sometimes they make some things easier, but I would in general not overuse them. And as I said in another stream some days ago, maybe exception handling with automated memory deallocation, other resource deallocation and freeing is much more much less error prone and much more reliable, or easier and to write and maintain. And what do you think? So wait a second, here is something scroll. I think there are some hobby OSs in Haskell, but always run. Yeah, so they are really manually. There's even Temple OS and maybe even one in F or something or whatever. And certainly they're not only basic, but also Lisp machines and Smalltalk, and some compilers literally force you to declare stuff in the beginning of the function. Yeah, but this is old-fashioned. So this is old-fashioned C. This forcing to declare in the beginning of a function, that is like C89 or something. And this is maybe since C99 or something of that sort. And certainly C++ allows this anyway, but yeah, I know this was a thing, but in my opinion, the Linux kernel also does it like this, maybe for stack, to make sure that the stack is always resized in the beginning of the function, or I don't know, maybe. But I would argue that readability and maintainability trumps all of this, and I would rather declare this, especially loop variables, always in the loop already. Everything, especially as this is a kernel, right? This is your last or first and only line of defense, and then you should use each syntactic language sugar that is available to make sure to avoid as many stupid mistakes as possible. And then you could argue, yeah, but other people read it, it's reviewed, and yeah, but you see so many security issues always found even decades later. Then I would argue each language mechanism that helps maintainability and readability should be used, and not say, yeah, it's fine, it already in the 80s we have always done it like this, like, yeah, we've always done it like this. Some duct tape over the, yeah, you name it. Method are, they like to call it what? I do agree though, here, or method, I think, yeah. While doing a microkernel, if you want to be different, it has to be different. It's infeasible to expect change with no changing. Yeah, that's true also. I mean, people need to make experience, right? You need to make experiments and research and try new stuff out. And when I look at the really sad state of graphics that you could argue, yeah, but AMD is quite nicely, AMD and Intel and some other embedded open source stuff is quite relatively nicely accelerated. But I would argue, first of all, it is a total open source fail that we let all those good old drivers to bitrot and be deleted, that people previously spent months and years to develop in the late 90s and 2000s, like Matrox and other fun stuff. Not that everyone, but even Matrox is still relatively a little bit usable also, especially those with DVI output, or they have alpha blending for blending textures for your fancy transparent desktop and spinning cubes and stuff. And yeah, this is why, if this kind of code, and again, Dragonfly is one of those more a little bit more modern. And then when you take a look, for example, the D, let's say, okay, this has already a couple of files, surprisingly, but the code would not be surprised if it's not touched in a long time. Maybe not much touched since 1994. And some Dragonfly BSD. Yeah, it's just really old stylish code, right? So parity. Yeah, you name it. Where's the main function? Main. main int args. That is int argc unused. What? Argc is unused. Why? What have they done here? Only live on YouTube on this channel. It's interesting that they so set local setup and okay, setup while files count dd in, dd close. Twice as such if may perform significant amounts of work when the writer scripture is close, the outer scripture is specifically the summary handler called from an exit included in this work, okay, whatever. Anyway, this is what C code looks like in your how DD, yeah, well, anyway, you get the idea. And let's see how many more comments we have. If we change, there are 1,000 Linux institutions all do the same thing. So yeah, well, they all do the same thing, except at least some use another C library or stuff like this. But yeah, this is why I wanted to spread here some findings over the last decades to motivate people also, because somehow what I meant in the other live stream was OS innovation has mostly for 99% of the people, OS innovation has become creating another Linux distribution, and somehow nowadays just doing something in the cloud means taking Linux and putting there some new stuff in. You've seen just the other live stream, IT News, there is now the new Fuse-based virtual I/O directly map file system protocol thing. I mean, you see file systems Hammer 2 on the Linux virt.io, P9, Fuse, and everything in the kitchen sink. It's no wonder everything becomes larger. And even there was even once a security issue in running virtual machines with QEMU, KVM, with a disk floppy controller, right? So although nobody was using it, it was always there by default. So many virtual machines were running with an emulated floppy disk controller, and then there was some security issue in there, and you could break out of the virtual machine of the guest in your cloud infrastructure farm over the security issue there in the floppy disk emulation, which is certainly hilarious, right? It's year 2000, but that was already 3 years ago, so 2015 or something of that sort. So yeah, this is why attack surface, right? Never put stuff in there that you don't use. At last resort, there is a security issue in there anyway. Especially because 1,000 people have read this code, this old-fashioned C code, and have not found this issue, right? Because why should they look into the floppy disk emulation too much? For loops in particular are pissing Christian off with their compilers. You have to declare I at the beginning of the function, like what the heck, but I hope that it's not this. But we use C++ when our code base compiles in C++ though, but maybe that is different in their C compiler, or you are working with only with C, certain C++. They do accept it in C hash constantly in their thing. Well, at least on the C++ side, with the last years, like last decade, Visual C++, at least our C++, well, but even then, their C99 stuff support is not complete anyway, and yeah, fun stuff like that. Yeah, but consistency, totally agree. Consistency was certainly never much of a thing at Microsoft. I mean, most of the APIs suck majorly. I mean, I called it out multiple times, even for file system notification. What on Linux is iNotify. On Windows, I found probably in a couple of afternoon time, I found I think 3 implementations of iNotify, and all of them sucked. And basically all of them were ugly to work with, totally crappy APIs from the last millennium or so, and all of them were not guaranteed to not lose events, and it's like, it's hilarious. 0 frames today, that is also amazing. Bike shredding, but 1 million bikers don't like it either, and I think it's mandated by BSD, though the organization of the source tree, and has been just further down. Yeah, I mean, it's on one way not the worst thing to have everything integrated, but just then you have on top of the kernel an even larger code base with all your commands in there. So this is why, and also the commands are written really simple here. As you have seen, can be If add is, okay, add is a little bit, hey, this is a readme, fun stuff from 1999 even, surprisingly. Pro, you have everything together, you have one code style, you can build everything in one pass. On the other hand, the Linux kernel with all its 10,000 drivers is already large enough. Why put all the commands in there? And also you usually want to update the kernel independently of all your commands that barely changed in 1999 anyway, or 18.9. And yeah, anyway, so on the other hand, these tools there are super small and certainly super simple. So they are more like busy box in a way than, of course, the GNU stuff in util Linux and core utils becomes larger and larger. And so yeah, anyway, you get the idea. I hope you enjoyed this and learned something. That was a quick look on DragonflyBSD, maybe for the fun fact and learning experience. Well, certainly for all the fun stuff to come, we will for sure try to get X up and running, maybe in the office in another week, or also additionally run this and deploy this here for one test server. I have already one web server, fun fact, deployed with our Musel build of T2. Of course, right now all of our servers run T2, of course, our unsuccessful one-man Linux, where also other people contribute. In total, probably more than 100 people, if not much more than 100 people over the last 2 decades, especially counting Rock Linux times anyway. And so all of them are running Rock Linux. Actually, fun fact, one server still runs Rock Linux with updates certainly from 2004 or something, or 2003. But I put one Musel of those builds that we've done recently, the small alternative C library, this muselibc. And there you see benefits on Linux. You can have alternative C libraries if you want smaller. And also, disadvantage, the GNU libc is so large that alternative C libraries are being developed. Pro and con, both, whatever. But for the testing fun of it, I deployed, so one of our web servers is now running latest T2 build because testing our own dog food with muselibc. And fully built with CLang, by the way. So this one web server, I will not tell you which, though, not that you have it too easy to hack. I probably need to up security anyway with all our YouTube exposure now. But yeah, one is running muselibc with the whole system built with CLang. Our GCC lib system purely built with LLVM CLang with muselibc just for testing that. I think also mostly maybe link time optimized, although I think this also you see people on Gen 2 and Phoronix link time optimization, and this compiler, I think link time optimization barely improved much. Beside, yeah, it's mostly running Apache and not much else except the Linux kernel. But another day I will probably, yeah, next also on this YouTube channel. So not only do we need to continue with this next CLang, LLVM Clang CLang release, can we build Linux kernel? Next step there on that front, and otherwise DragonflyBSD and Haiku real hardware, and possibly maybe deploying some small web server just for testing and exposure and stuff. Let's shut down this here and see what happens with no or whatever, and that even works. Amazing stuff. Hope you learned something. And do we have here more stuff? And further down, probably not right now. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. If you have any comments to whatever you need to do, run commands, install, emerge the world there, build the world, and Xorg, or what your thoughts are. And also, the life is long, right? So we have many years to come. So we for sure will also just test install other fun operating systems. Fun fact, this doesn't really power off completely like with HCPI or something power off or whatever of that sort. Anyway, so we have also so many other systems to install. Maybe this AROS Amiga research operating system and all the other fun stuff. As usual, leave me in the comments below what you want me to test and run and play around with, and what you think, what is your opinion, what do you like to run on your desktop, on your server, and I hope to see you soon for all this fun stuff to come.